It's another Football Friday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, joined by my intrepid college football coverage team, starting with our OU beat writer Ryan Aber, columnist Barry Trammell, columnist Jenny Carlson, and OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson. Guys, let's start with the Cowboys last night. Kyle, you were there in Stillwater to watch the Cowboys win over Texas Tech. Surprise of surprises. Here we are at the 1/3 way through the season. Who had Dax Garman as the Cowboys MVP in their preseason projections? You, Kyle?
No, not me, and definitely not J.W. Walsh. I imagine he didn't see the season panning out this way, as we've seen through the first few games here. But you're right. I mean, the things that Garmin has brought to the table through these past couple games we've seen with the deep ball has completely changed this Cowboy offense, and definitely bodes well for the future as these young guys continue to grow.
Hey, what about Garmin, Barry, has surprised you most?
Well, I mean, you know what? He runs better than I thought. He took off a couple of times. He scrambled for a first down, and then he ran sort of, wasn't a trick play, but sort of a misdirection play for a touchdown, 7, 8, 9 yards out last night. So he moves a little bit better than I thought. When he sets up, he's got a big-time arm. Now, if you harry him, if you rush him, if you make him sort of throw on the move, then all bets are off. But he's got a big-time arm, and he's throwing it out there well for those big receivers.
Jenny, Mike Gundy, of course, before the Florida State game, played footsie a little bit with Dax Garman, and the media saying, I forget what the number was, 10, 15 plays. He was looking at Dax Garman. Let me ask you this. Had Dax Garman played that 10 or 15 plays, would it have been a different outcome in the Cowboys opener against the defending national champs?
You know, it's an interesting question, and I'm not sure we know, but clearly the way he can stretch the field with his arm is something that J.W. Walsh just can't do. I mean, maybe there'll come a point in his career when he'll get it, but if he doesn't have it to this point, I can't imagine it's forthcoming. Dax Garman just has an unbelievable arm, accurate, strong. So, I think that's putting the ball in the hands of your most talented group, the wide receivers. Last night we saw Marcel Aitman have a big night. He hadn't really caught that many passes. You saw a guy like Juwan Seals, a guy like Brandon Shepard, who had been key cogs in other games, not have as many catches. I think it just speaks to the depth of that receiver core that any of those guys could be the guy on any given night and go for big numbers. That's really hard to guard against when you're a defense. So it'll be really interesting to see how that continuing ability to stretch the field plays into OSU's offense.
As his advance for the OSU-Texas Tech game, Kyle Fredrickson wrote about the fully inflated OSU offense. What it did was inflate the field. They attacked deep like we never saw before. As a bridge over to OU, though, Ryan, there's a common denominator here. Surprise contributors, surprise linchpins. At OU, it's Samaje Perine. Did you have him as your MVP?
Absolutely not. And I don't know that I quite call him their most valuable player, but he certainly made a case to be their best offensive player, at least. To me, the most impressive thing about the last week at West Virginia was the way he didn't seem to wear down. He was getting the same runs in the fourth quarter as he was in the first and second. We'd seen him have big, productive second halves through the first few games of the year, but hadn't really seen him do it for 4 quarters, and he definitely did that the other night when he was carrying the load for the Sooners offensively.
Of course, the performance at the 1/3 way by Dax Garman for the Cowboys, Samaje Perine for the Sooners. Barry, to me, sort of begs the question, is this their offense going forward? Is this the optimal? Let's start with OU. Playing that way, as the way they did at West Virginia, is that the optimal offense for the Sooners?
Well, I think it's the optimal offense for anybody if you can just hand the ball off and run up and down the field. Michael Leach would do that if he could get away with it. So I think that's what they'll try to do. The offensive line, from all accounts, is fantastic. Perine and Ford, when he gets back, are durable, tough backs. Alex Ross gives you a different look with his speed. So it's set up for a great running offense, and that only will help a quarterback just take a load off Trevor Knight's shoulders. So I think this is what the Sooners will try to do. We'll see if they can pull it off against the better teams on the schedule.
Good question. Good question, Barry. Can they pull it off? Jenny, can the Cowboys play the way they did against Tech going forward? Iowa State next week, and then after that, Kansas. It looks like they're going to get a chance to sort of really try it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Tech did in loading up the box, they sold out and decided they were going to see if OSU could throw it deep, and lo and behold, they could, and they did. They were willing to use that part of their offense. So I got to think at some point that opens up the run game, that, defenses are going to say, man, we can't live with that. We're going to drop that safety back in coverage, and suddenly the middle of the field looks a little different. The edges look a little different for guys like Des Rowland, Tyreek Hill. It was a frustrating night for those guys. I talked to Des Rowland a little bit afterwards, and you could kind of tell it was like, I'm not sure I like this whole blocking thing that I have to do a bunch now. But, at some point, there's going to be teams that say, nope, we're going to try the coverage route and make you beat us on the ground. And then it's up to those guys to make plays. So, I think it will be interesting to see sort of what defenses do in an attempt to try to stop that passing game. Because right now the intermediate passing game is not really that fantastic. Dax Garman has been more off on that than he has with the deep ball. He's thrown that seemingly better than he's thrown the intermediate stuff. So if he can gain a little more consistency in the short and intermediate game, man, that really changes the dynamic, because that's a whole other aspect that opens up the field for the Cowboys.
Kyle, Jenny made an interesting point about sort of the so-so intermediate passing game for the Cowboys. What does the bombs away or run approach do? It seems to me that it takes some of the risk out of the Cowboys' passing game and really gives the defense a rough choice to make. Can the Cowboys present that equation going forward?
I think so, and like Jenny had mentioned, teams are going to start keying in on the fact that Garmin relies so heavily on the deep ball. But the good news with the deep ball is that when he's off the mark, when Garmin has missed on those passes, it's been over the head of the receiver and the defensive back. So there's a little bit less risk involved in some of those intermediate passes, like the two interceptions that we saw last night. But it bodes well, I think, for the Cowboys for the next couple weeks here to kind of continue working on that identity. We talked about how backloaded this schedule was for OSU, facing Baylor and OU on the road to finish out the year. But now you get Iowa State at home, you go to Kansas. After watching the performance against Texas Tech, you figure those are two very winnable games for OSU, where these guys will continue to kind of figure it out. Because you got to think that OSU can't just keep bombing it down the field, and expect teams to just keep allowing that to happen. But as Jenny mentioned, that's going to unload the box a little bit and give those OSU running backs a little bit more room to run once they get past that second level. So it's kind of a strange system they have going, but if it produces results, and if you have those wide receivers with long arms who basically go up and rebound these deep passes, you might as well go with what works.
Jenny, Barry, Kyle, I'll throw a question out to you that Mark May of ESPN raised last night before the game, in which he said one of Mike Gundy's best accomplishments as a coach is always having a quarterback prepared to excel in the Cowboy offense. Barry, you agree with him?
Yeah, I would say this about Gundy. I don't think he's handled the politics of his quarterbacks very well. But I think he and his offensive coordinators have handled the development of their quarterbacks exceptionally well. Whoever they throw in there seems to work. Now they got down on Walsh a year ago after the West Virginia game, and then the TCU was not a good start, and they went to Clint Chelf, and Chelf was much better. But for the most part, anybody in 2012, whoever they threw in there did well. Whoever they go to Chelf last year, he does well. This season, I thought J.W. Walsh actually was very effective against Florida State. He had 2 costly turnovers, but he was very effective. And he goes in and he goes down, and here comes Dax Garman, and he's effective. So I think Gundy does get plaudits for the way he's developed quarterbacks, does have them ready, seems to adapt his offense, which he's got. He knows what he wants to do, but he still adapts it to their strengths. So I think that's probably is a strength of Gundy's.
Politics could come back into play if J.W. Walsh returns to health. Kyle, Jenny, has a ship sailed on Walsh, or is Gundy facing another vexing question?
I think it's hard to say. So much can change over the course of the season, and by the time Walsh could be healthy, it's probably going to be late in the year, and that's when we're talking about Baylor and talking about OU. Do you want to just throw in a guy who hasn't played all year at that point? I don't think you do. If it were this week, well, I think the conversation gets a little more interesting because Dax Garman has definitely changed the offense, and he has shown that he can really utilize these deep threats on the outside. But like Barry said, it's not like JW, came out with a complete stinker against Florida State. He had done well. He had used his feet to make big plays, and despite those 2 turnovers against Florida State, was otherwise very productive. So if that conversation were to happen today, I think you'd probably lean towards JW because he's the veteran leader. But by the time Walsh is going to be ready to come back, Garman's going to have so many starts under his belt, and I'm guessing that he's going to continue to improve as a passer, that it would be hard to pull the plug on him.
Jenny, will there be some more fun quarterback decisions with Mike Gundy in our near future?
Oh, I don't know. It seems like the carousel never stops when it comes to quarterback controversy at OSU. Even a year when we think, well, this is all figured out, then it always seems to come back and start turning. So, if J.W. Walsh's return takes as long as they've indicated, maybe on the short side 6 weeks, even if he comes back in, say, 5 weeks, we're still going to have a pretty good body of work for coaches to look at on Dax Garman. And, unless he just throws up something that is just impossible to stomach, I think he's the guy. I think he's the guy that they go with, and Walsh becomes kind of that spot guy at the quarterback position that you throw in, and maybe in a wildcat situation, that you maybe put on the field with Garman, confuse defenses a little bit. I just think if OSU's offense is what they espouse it to be, a throw it down the field offense that really stretches people out, I think you have to go with Garman, because while the body of work is smaller with him, the body of work on J.W. Walsh is big, and we know that that's not part of what he does. He just isn't able to consistently throw it down the field. Even against Missouri State, who Dax Garman exploited. I know it's not a great opponent, but it's a common foe for those 2 quarterbacks. Walsh was dinking and dumping, and the receivers were all being used in the short game, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But if you've got guys like Aitman and Shepard and James Washington who can run like those guys can run, don't you want to run them and see if they can outrun some guys like they did last night? That's what Dax Garman allows you to do, and I think that's going to be pretty powerful to walk away from.
Of course, Jenny, you're the person who I guess we could have put the headline, Dax Garman, you had me at hello. You wrote right off the start. That's the guy. You're sticking by it. Ryan, I mentioned, has the ship sailed on J.W. Walsh? When people follow the Sooners watch Samaje Perine run in West Virginia last Saturday, they kind of wondered who needs this Joe Mixon guy. This week there was a Joe Mixon court date set. What's the latest on that? And is it possible that we don't see Joe Mixon again in the Sooner uniform?
Yeah, I'll start with your last question, and I think it certainly is possible with the videotape still to come out on November 1st, his trial set right now for October 27th, jury selection on October 20th. I'm not sure that we're going to see a jury trial in this, but seeing the date set before the videotape is set for wide release was interesting. And right now, Samaje Perine, not only Samaje Perine, but Alex Ross and Keith Ford are doing their best to make OU fans forget about this five-star phenom that we heard a lot about last year. A big part of his hype going around Joe Mixon was that he could contribute immediately, given that they had lost Damian Williams, Brennan Clay, Roy Finch. Now that these 3 have proven that they can carry those loads, I think Joe Mixon is certainly less needed, and you wonder what the public backlash is going to be once that tape comes out. It's not pretty to watch, and I think we all know what's in the tape, but for those who haven't seen it, seeing it is something completely different.
Barry, we talked about this a lot at the staff meeting, the Ray Rice video changing things. There's the off-the-field question about Joe Mixon, but on the field, of course, it's OU apparently has an embarrassment of riches of young running backs. Yet Pirine was so strong, so the way he ran and the way it really broke West Virginia's will. Is there a chance that Bob Stoops sort of abandons this backfield by committee approach and goes to Pirine as a lead back?
Yes, I think there is a good chance of that, and I think Stoops might be slow to do it once he gets back and sees what Ford is like and how healthy Ford is, how Ford would run in a similar situation, because Ford's really good too. But I think there is a chance because Bob likes to say, hey, if you give me a big time back that can carry the load, I'll let him carry the load. Talking about people like Quentin Griffin and Adrian Peterson and the like. But I think there's definitely a chance of that. I don't think he's going to be slow to bail on Keith Ford, though.
Jenny,
I think he will be slow to bail on Keith Ford.
Jenny, the Sooners really have, those three, an interesting compliment. I mean, I keep coming back to Pirine's comments the first week in which he said we can be one of the best backfields ever. Of course, Barry and I chuckle at such a things. But with every growing week, with Alex Ross taking one to the house, with Samaje Pirine breaking teams' wills, are we looking at least a very, very special and a reason why OU thinks it can go a long, long way this year and maybe next?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always interesting when you've got that running back by committee thing, because lots of times, it's sort of, well, who's really your guy? I think it may be emerging that Samaje Pirine is the guy. I think he may be the go-to if you need, a yard here or a big play. But I tell you what, the home run capability of Alex Ross is impressive. I think Jason referenced it in something this week that he already has 3 plays of 80 yards plus. I mean, that's remarkable stuff. That's scary stuff when you're an opposing defense. And I think, too, this is something else that the guys wrote about this week, is that offensive line. I mean, as good as those backs are, this is a line that has really proven to be impressive. Their sheer size has been touted by a lot of people. ESPN, I believe, did a chart comparing them to NFL lines, and the fact that there's only one offensive line in the NFL that is bigger pound-wise than OU's is, and they really wear people down. That's what they've been doing so far. So I think that's another aspect of the run game that can't be overlooked. That's really a hard punch for defenses to take. And, oh, by the way, if OU gets in trouble, they can let Trevor Knight take off a few times and use his shifting moves. I just think that's a tough run game to defend against.
Wrapping up on the Sooners, who go to the Dallas-Fort Worth area next Saturday to face Texas Christian, TCU. Ryan, there's word out of Dallas that Josh Heupel is a leading candidate for the SMU job. What do you make of that, and is that a good move for Heupel?
Yeah, I think eventually he's going to have to leave OU to take a job. Now, there had been some talk that SMU hadn't really invested themselves in football very well. June Jones was a little bit disenchanted with the way that the school was running the football program down there. I think he would have to get some pretty major assurances that would change. SMU has been down for a long time with the success, with the sort of little bump that June Jones brought him a couple years ago. But if they're going to make that commitment, yeah, I think it'd be a good move. My guess is they're not going to make that commitment. I would hold on and wait for another job to make the jump from Norman from the co-offensive coordinator spot.
Barry, when you look at it, Bob Stoops' offensive coordinators or play callers and their jumps, Mike Leach to Tech, Mark Mangino to Kansas, Kevin Wilson to Indiana, Kevin Sumlin to Houston, whom I met, Chuck Long to San Diego State. Where would this rank among good jumps?
It'd rank at the bottom. I wouldn't go. SMU has been a coach killer for 2 decades since it came back from the death penalty. Look at some SMU coaches Who's gone on from SMU elsewhere? Nobody. It's a coach killing job. I wouldn't take it. I'd call Dallas, and I'd recommend Cale Gundy for the job if I was Heupel.
Let's transition. Let's stay on the light side of things. Guys, I was watching football last night on television. I've been watching the last 2 games for OU and OSU, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with helmets. I looked it up. It's the Rorschach test. You ever heard of it, Barry?
No.
You look at this.
Sent me an email about it, and I didn't have any idea what you were talking about last night.
That's the ink blot test, Barry.
It's the ink blot test. I'm checking.
Where you look at it and have to study it and see if it's.
Yeah, if you see Jesus on your toast, I mean, stuff like that. Do you see bunnies in the clouds, that sort of thing?
Bunnies in the clouds, Jesus on your toast. What did you see in the OU alternative helmet? I'm hoping our producer, Paige, do you have that image I sent you, Paige, of the OU helmet? I'm wanting to get one word. When you look at OU's alternative helmets that they used at West Virginia, what'd you think, Ryan?
It reminded me of a bowling ball. The wood grain effect wood didn't come through, but it looked like one of those shiny, polished bowling balls.
How about it? One word, Jenny, for the OU helmets.
That's
guessing we don't have that. We don't have that image, but you're going to have to use your imagination.
No, I remember it. I'm just trying to think of what that one word would be. I liked them. I mean, I know that there was a lot of discussion amongst Sooner fans about the alternate uniforms, but I liked the helmets. I thought they were cool. So cool. How about that?
Cool. Barry, what you got?
49ers. They look like the San Francisco 49ers to me.
Kyle?
They ran onto the field at Morgantown. The lights are shining. The glare is so much off the helmets, I couldn't even tell what they look like, other than they seem to be gold and look like the 49ers. I thought, why are they looking like the San Francisco 49ers?
Probably not a good thing if you're OU and you got a brand. Kyle, what'd you think?
With the OSU or the OU?
Go ahead and start with OSU since you were there last night.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I'd go with something like, I don't know, astronaut. I mean, these things are futuristic. I mean, what are uniforms going to look like in 20 years? I mean, everything, with the holographic and, Tech had the Matador huge logo on the side. It's just it's crazy. It's if you take a look at the evolution of the football helmet over the years, I mean we've reached some new territory with how crazy these guys have been getting.
Those helmets last night Tech had, I tried to see what that was. It was like one of those holographic images that you're supposed to look through and see something. I looked at those things 2 or 3 times trying to figure out what exactly it was. I'm sorry, they're hand-painted too, apparently. I was trying to be impressed and artsy-fartsy, and I couldn't pull it off.
Our good friend John Helsley described it as a bull. Barry, is it a bull?
I don't have any idea. I thought the Sooners were wearing 49er helmets. You want me to tell you what's going on at the helmets at Boone Pickens Stadium? I couldn't tell. I was just pleased. I will say this for that game last night. Here's what I told the people I was sitting by. That game accomplished the ultimate goal in uniforms. The reason uniforms exist is so that you can tell the 2 teams apart. There was no question about who was who last night. One was wearing all black and bright orange, and the other was wearing solid white with some shades of gray or whatever that was.
Actually, Barry, I heard from somebody on Twitter that they turned on the game and had no idea who was who.
Well, the point. What I'm saying is the point of uniforms is not so you can tell if that's a certain team. The point of uniforms is to tell the 2 teams apart.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
Yeah, they were 2 teams. We were talking about elephants and giraffes. It was that big of a difference.
You know what Texas Tech helmets reminded me of are the airbrush paintings at the state fair where they paint the shirts and things like that with the red outline around the Red Raider. It was just a strange look.
Jenny, it actually reminded me a little something we talked about when we were playing our Thunder coverage, the Sand Ridge Sand Art. I thought somebody just kind of sort of combed their hand through it, and there it was. They said, there's a painting. Might look like finger painting in Michael's second grade class.
Here's the travesty. The very best uniform color combination on planet Earth is red and black. You put red and black together, and nobody does much of it other than Texas Tech. Texas Tech had great uniform colors, and so what did they do last night? They wore no red and they wore no black.
I'm going to go with green and gold as the best uniform combination, and Baylor seems to be shy of doing that. Finally, guys, in the Gina Mizell, Vinegar Ben Mizell Memorial uniform, did anybody stay up late and see that thing that Arizona State wore on its head?
No, I went to bed early last night.
Did you see it? Did you see the helmet?
Yeah,
Well,
we saw him little, didn't we, Jackie O?
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember. What'd they wear? The flat black helmet?
No, it was
gold, wasn't it? Wasn't it gold?
Fiery helmet.
The fire, walking through fire, Sons of Anarchy, Hell's Angels, Manson family, Charlie's Angels. Lots of things came to mind. But
Well, has anybody seen the Nebraska helmets for tomorrow? Because they may be the weirdest ones I've seen, and not sort of weird in the artsy fartsy way, but they've got it looks like it's like a half helmet. Like, they put those caps on the helmets at practice.
Yep.
It's like red, flat black cap, and then it's shiny black, it looks like, in the back. I have never seen anything like it. I'm not sure what they're going for there. I mean, it's no Maryland, my Maryland, but it's a little bit odd.
well, who can be?
Nebraska clearly is trying to take everybody's mind off the quality of their football team.
I think there's a lot of folks out there doing it for unknown reasons. That's all for this edition of Football Friday, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman.